Hi, folks. If anyone's out in the hall, if you could just come in, we're just about to get started.
Anybody out here, we're about to start, so please come in.
That is a great welcome in. Don't be shy. Don't be shy if you want to come up. Victim Services, I see you. Don't worry if you don't want to move, no problem. I'll just give a minute for those folks coming in. There we go. Some people not scared of the front. Perfect. All right. It looks like we have everyone in here. Is this volume okay for folks? Can you hear me at the back? That's okay. If you can't hear me, you can come up to the front. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name's Alexis Cook. I'm the coordinator of the Grey Bruce Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. One of our priority areas under that is crime prevention, led by our lovely police services, victim services, and Crime Stoppers. There's the chief back there as well, too. Thanks for coming. So with that being said, one of our priority areas is human trafficking, which we're here to chat about tonight. And for folks, well, I think we're online right now. Yep, see a thumbs up. Perfect. Thanks for joining us online. Appreciate that. So tonight is going to be a night about listening, learning, and connecting with one another. So we're going to hear from people with lived experience. We're going to hear from police. And then we're going to have an opportunity to have your questions answered as well by our panel. So we'll start off with our police presentation. Then we have 3 folks with lived experience who are going to speak. We're going to take a 5-10 minute break. And if you haven't had any of those chocolate chip cookies out there, folks online, I'm sorry, there's some really good cookies out there. Thank you very much. Please do help yourselves out there. We do ask that you don't take any photos or videos tonight to respect the privacy of our speakers. You're more than welcome to take notes, or if you have questions after, chat with them or grab a resource on your way out. But just please know photography, same as folks online. Please do not take photos or any videos. And before we get started, I just really want to thank Southport Church for hosting us and David. We really appreciate being able to use the space, lovely hospitality here, and welcoming us in for this very important topic in the community. So thank you to all of you folks, the door greeters, the folks who brought coffee, the cookies. It's really much appreciated, and it makes us feel welcome in the community to share topics such as these. So before we get started, some of the topics you're going to hear tonight and some of the stories are triggering. They might bring up feelings that you're not ready for. We do have some counselors who are available. The counselors in the room can just wave their hands. They're just right at the back there. So you can just tap them on the shoulder and let them know you need a chat. For our folks online, there's the 988 suicide number. You can also reach out to 211, and they can direct you to any services for an immediate crisis as well, too. Please call 911 if you need any of those supports. Same goes to the folks in this room as well. Take care of yourself first tonight. So with that being said, I will make sure I get the introduction correct for our first speaker tonight. So it's Sergeant Susan Briggs, and she started her career with the Halton Regional Police back in 2005. She transferred over to Saugeen Shores Police, good choice, in 2008, and she spent a bulk of her career in uniform patrol, spending time working as a detective constable in the Criminal Investigation and Drug Unit, and she's currently a sergeant working in uniform patrol. So she's going to kick us off tonight and get us started.
Okay, so, this is loud. So a few months back, Inspector Cook came to me and said, Susan, we're going to do town hall. We need to do a presentation on human trafficking, and I would like you to present it. My initial response or feeling inside was absolutely terrified. This is a lot different than being in a police car and talking to members of the community, but it's such an important topic that it is imperative that we talk about it. I'm so grateful for you guys to all take your time out of your busy schedules to be here to listen to some of this information. So just to start off, what is actually human trafficking? It's the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, controlling a person for the purpose of exploitation. These are all considered aspects of human trafficking. Layman's terms is basically human trafficking is modern slavery. There's 3 types of human trafficking: sex trafficking, labor trafficking, as well as organ removal. Because we have a limited time, we're going to focus mostly on the sex trafficking part of human trafficking tonight. So human trafficking, it is a global problem. It is the fastest growing crime on the planet. $152 billion a year industry. 27 million people are exploited in forced labor and trafficking worldwide. 12 million are exploited for sex, 1.2 of those are children, and 5.7 million children are currently enslaved for labor. In Canada, the true scope of human trafficking is underestimated. So there's a statistic that I found here. It's between 2010 and 2020, police services in Canada reported 2,977 cases of human trafficking, which I know is not even close. It's probably double, triple beyond what this is. The problem with statistics, and we talked about this at a meeting the other day, is that these are for reported human trafficking cases. Human trafficking itself is one of the most underreported offenses or crimes in Canada or in Ontario in general. A lot of that has to do, we'll get into it, and I'm not going to take the wind out of anyone else's sails, but it is one of the least reported crimes, and that's why the statistics that we have really aren't accurate in the slightest. So 96% of trafficking victims in Canada are female. 71% of trafficking victims are under the age of 25. 91% of human trafficking victims in Canada know their trafficker. You may wonder why some people don't, but that has to do with sometimes the person that's running the victim isn't necessarily the person that is in charge of trafficking them, so they may not even know who it is. Friends and acquaintances, spouses, boyfriends are the most popular type of traffickers, as well as criminal, business, and other types of relationships. So let's talk a little bit about our victims. Traffickers tend to prey on people who are vulnerable, and the factors that create vulnerabilities for sexual exploitation, the biggest one right now, I would say, is poverty. As you know, the cost of living is increasing. No one has a lot of money or extra money. So when people are online and they're seeing flashy things and they want stuff, when someone comes along and offers them that stuff, it's really appealing. Being female will increase your risk if there's a history of violence or neglect, if they are victims of child sexual abuse. When they're being trafficked, sometimes they don't even realize there's anything wrong with it. If they're used to violence, if they're used to being sexually abused, it's kind of like a normal thing in their life. Low self-esteem and the feeling of unloved. We're going to touch on that a little bit in a second. Typically in Canada, females are between the age of 13 to 25. They're really young, and this is really starting to trend more 13, 14, 15s. And before, when I talked about poverty, there's also a newer trend as well that some of these victims are actually coming from what we consider a stable home. So correlated risk factors for youth in trafficking specifically is if they come from an unstable home life, if there's physical sexual abuse, if they're chronic runaway, exposure to drugs, chronic neglect, if they're AWOL and truancy. Basically, if their life as a young person, if they're coming from a home where it's very unstable, where there's violence, and they're running away for some excitement, or they're running away to get away from the violence, it's increasing their risk factors to become victims of human trafficking. So right now, where do our youth turn to find comfort? So when I talked about stable homes, something that we kind of forget about is just because mom and dad live together under one roof, it doesn't mean that the kids are getting what they need. Neglect is not necessarily that they're not fed, clothed, sheltered. Sometimes it's because mom and dad are so busy trying to work to get money, to put food on the table, to pay the bills, that when they come home, they're so tired that the kids are kind of like left to be on their own. So when the kids are trying to find love, attention, affection, they tend to go online. You can see here, so YouTube, 93% is one of the most popular platforms for our youth. Where this is important is when, as I said, people want stuff, right? So on YouTube, they're showing Sephora, Lululemon, the hair, the nails, the lashes, and these young girls are seeing that and they think, if I get all this stuff, that's gonna make me happy. If I obtain this, then I'm gonna be beautiful, and then I'm gonna get the affection that I want. TikTok is huge. Snapchat, we had a case here last summer where this young girl and her friend, they just put it out there like, hey, anyone want to hang out? Instantly a guy messages like, yep, let's hang out. So she meets up with this complete stranger who is way older than she is. The first night was okay. Bought her a little booze, they went for a drive, no problem. She puts it out again the next day. Hey, does anyone want to hang out? Instantly he gets on board again. This time he picks up her friend, and another guy, proceeds to take her to Owen Sound. Then they come back to the beach. He buys her alcohol. He gives these girls who are 15, 16 years old lots of alcohol. Hey guys, let's go to my house to continue the party. So at this point where he's supposed to drive them home, he says, oh, sorry, I can't drive you home, I've been drinking. So, but if you want to sleep over, that's fine, you can sleep in my bed. Luckily, the girl had a sense about her. She went to the bathroom, took her phone, called mom for help. Mom came to us, we were able to go and save the other girl that was in there. And then he got a bunch of charges, but it can happen so quick that these young girls are just looking for attention, looking for fun, want to hang out. So we're just going to briefly go over this quickly. Stages of trafficking. Luring is the big one. So the Romeo boyfriend style, the trafficker assesses the victim's vulnerabilities, makes the victim feel special and loved, asks questions regarding what's lacking in their lives, finding the crack and filling it. So as soon as he finds out what she wants, then this is where he kind of like fills in that gap. So if she's someone who's like, if she says she started dabbling in drugs, oh, you like cocaine? I'll get that for you. How about we party? I'll go get some coke and I'll get you some booze and we'll have a good time. Or if it's someone who, you know, wants clothing or wants to have their nails done, their hair's done, you know what? You're great. Let me go buy that for you. You deserve it. I'm gonna get that for you. It could be the love portion of it. You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. I love you. We're gonna spend our lives together. Let's buy a house together. Let's have family together. And they start believing that this person's gonna take them away from their crappy life or what they think is their crappy life by following them because they're just so in love. So like I was just talking about the knight in shining armor, this person's gonna come in and you know what, this guy is the best person that's ever existed. He's gonna take me out of this situation that I'm in. He's gonna sell you the dream that she's gonna live the best life that's ever existed. And then it changes. So at this point, she's pretty much fallen in love. She thinks that this is the guy, this is the one, he is her soulmate. And then he starts to change a little bit. So what happens is she's so in love, oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. And then all of a sudden he just takes a step back. He'll just a little bit. And you know what? I didn't like the way you're looking at that guy. I didn't like the way that you were, talking, or I don't like the way you're dressed right now. And then she's so in love with him though that she's so afraid of losing that connection and that love that she starts to try to change just to get that back, to get that honeymoon phase back. So part of that is things like, okay, we go to a hotel room, it's the best hotel room. You know what? That cost me a lot of money, so I think that you need to help me pay for that. I know a really quick way that you can make some money. I've heard about it. It won't be forever, but if you just like go and have sex with that guy and make a lot of money, that's gonna help pay for it, and then we're gonna live the life. We're gonna live the dream again, but you just have to do this for a little bit, just to get there. So it continues like that to the point where they're so manipulated that he's broken down her self-esteem and confidence, uses emotional, mental, psychological, sexual forms of abuse on her. Like the whole, if you love me, you would do this for me. If you don't do this for me, then you don't love me. He isolates her from her family and her friends. He creates this feeling that she needs him to survive in life. And then they convince the victim that they need to do the sex work to contribute financially. So why don't they leave? This comes up in court all the time. Well, she could have left. Why didn't she just leave? Because there's always fear. It really comes down to fear. She's afraid of losing that love and that connection that she had. She's afraid that if it's become violent in this part of the relationship, she's afraid that if she leaves and he catches her, what's he going to do? There's the fear of the unknown. If I leave, because right now, her clothes, her housing, her food, although he controls every aspect of that, is taken care of. So if she leaves that, then now she's leaving everything that she knows is taken care of. So she has to basically start over, and that's very scary. And then there's also the trauma bond too, where she still loves them. No matter, through all the things that he's done to her, making her do, she still loves him. So here's a few red flags that we can look at for our youth, is if there's a sudden change in their behavior or their mood, if they're withdrawing from or losing connection with their family and their friends, dropping or missing classes regularly, reluctant to engage with teachers, coaches, adult influences, if they have these new friends who provide gifts, drugs. Like if your teenage girl walks through the door and she's got a brand new Lulu sweatshirt on, and you didn't buy it for her, and she doesn't have money for it, but her new friend bought it for her because she's a good friend, that's a pretty big red flag, something's going on. And then the uncharacteristic sudden interest in traveling to another city. I want to go to Toronto. I want to go to Barrie. I want to go check this out with my new friends. Those are all things that I'm not saying for sure it's certain, but it's definitely some red flags to start paying attention to what's going on. So who can be a trafficker? Essentially, it can be anyone. Before, like when you think about, you probably think about the one on the left there, the pimps with the big fros and the outfits and stuff, but it's not that anymore. It can be anyone, including females. There is an increase now with female traffickers that are recruiting some of our young girls. And specifically for Grey Bruce, the reason that's happening here is geological isolation and the allure of the city, right? Nothing happens in Bruce County. It's boring. There's nothing to do. So if you get a promise of, hey, we're going to go to Toronto, we're going to go party, we're going to go to a concert, we're going to go, it's pretty alluring, right? Lack of resources and awareness. Even my dad today, and he's like, Sue, what's your presentation on like human trafficking? He's like, oh, does that happen here? Like, yes, Dad, it actually happens everywhere. Higher substance abuse rates in Grey Bruce County. Not quite sure why, we haven't nailed this down, but alcohol, pot, drug use in Grey Bruce County tends to be higher up here for some reason. Port towns, Meaford, Owen Sound, Port Elgin, easy access to the city. In like 2.5 hours, you're back in the city. There's a huge tourist industry, large-scale events. So I was doing foot patrol at Pumpkin Fest a couple weekends ago, and sadly, this is how my brain goes. I'm like, wow, this is a great luring ground for human trafficking. Because I'm thinking, here's a guy, he brings a car up, some young girls, they're, oh, hey, you from here? Oh, wow, that's great, yeah, so I don't want to tell you this, but you're really good looking. You're really good looking. Is there any chance you want to meet later? Like, maybe we could just, I could get some booze and we could just go party at the beach or something. And it's just so simple, just like a normal dating thing, but that's just one way that they can get lured in. These are so many transient people at Pumpkin Fest. I'm like, I don't know, probably, 95% of these people, they're all coming from outside of town. And the other thing too is there's high rates of male workers in the area that are doing contract work. This is not Bruce Power's fault at all. Let me just go disclaimer that. But there are a lot of contractors that are in town coming and going. From experience, I've seen where they come into town, they're making tons of money, they're away from their family, they're away from their wives, and they start living like rock stars. So, drugs, sex, alcohol. So it's kind of like a playground up here for that. So what are we doing about it? Ontario's strategy to end human trafficking, this came up, and they invested, between 2020 and up to 2025, Ontario's invested $307 million over a 5-year program to work on strategies aimed at raising awareness, protecting the victims, intervening early, and supporting survivors. Bill 96 came in, which is an anti-human trafficking act. It includes 2 statutes, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Act, as well as Prevention of Remedies and Human Trafficking Act. We'll touch on that in a second. And Bill 89, which I think is the best right now, it's Child, Youth, and Family Services Act. So before, a child in need of protection had to be the age of 16. They've increased it up to the age of 18. So if I go to a hotel room and I see that there's a girl in there and I think that she's being human trafficked who appears to be under the age of 18, I have the ability to apprehend her under this act, not arrest. I can apprehend her for up to 12 hours to just get her out of that situation. If she resists, mind you, I walk away because I can't use any force, even though I know she's a victim. She may not even know that she's being a victim. So what's changed with the law? 286.1, it's criminalizing the buyers. So this is what is a big change. Before, the prostitution or the sex trade workers were the ones that were being criminalized. They would be charged for selling sex. And they realized that, well, you can't charge someone who's actually a victim of human trafficking. So what they ended up doing is they've switched it, so now it's illegal to purchase sex in Canada, but it's not illegal to sell it. So when someone I was talking to yesterday said, oh, there's this woman, and she's got a trailer, and she pulls up, and she does her stuff, and I said, well, and sadly, it's not illegal for her to do that. The person knocking on the trailer door, mind you, is a different story. Material benefits of offenses. So if someone's actually gaining material benefit from the act of someone that they're trafficking, that's an offense. Procures a person to offer or provide sexual services. Recruits, holds, conceals, harbor, exercises control, direction, influence. These are such big terms, but basically if they're controlling someone to have sex, then they can be charged. If they're advertising those sexual services, so if they're on Leo's list, back pages, what's the other ones? Craigslist, any of those stuff. If the person is putting the ad on for the young person, then they can be charged for doing that. And also withholding or destroying documents. So if the trafficker has her ID, her passport, all those stuff, holds it as part of control over her, then they can be charged with those offenses as well. And this one, I know it's not new, but it was new to me. Just recently became aware of it, and I don't think a lot of people do know about it. But it's provincial legislation under the Human Trafficking Act that enables a new type of restraining order, specifically for victims and survivors of human trafficking, or those at risk of being trafficked, which is super important because you don't need to have a criminal charge to get this type of restraining order in place. It allows individuals to apply for restraining orders against traffickers, not only the victims, but parents, legal guardians, and customary caregivers. So if you have a daughter who's 15 years old and this guy has come in and you know that he's trafficking her, you can reach out to this legal support program and they can work at getting a restraining order against him, against your daughter, which is an amazing piece of legislation that doesn't exist in the criminal code, I can tell you that for sure. And it also allows the victim of human trafficking to sue their trafficker civilly, which again has never happened before. And the restraining orders can be for longer than 3 years. It says if there's a need. So right now in the criminal code, a peace bond restraining order typically lasts for about a year, and once it's done, then it's gone. This can be 3 years. Talking to one of the people that actually prosecute, they typically try to go for 5, and right now she's doing a case where she's actually asking for 10 years. So what's nice with this type of restraining order is it's enforceable by police under the Criminal Code of Canada 127, where if a person fails to comply with the court order, then we can actually charge them for that. Because otherwise, human trafficking is one of the most complex investigations that we run into with police. The victims, a lot of the time, they don't want to participate for a various amount of reasons. I'm sure we'll hear about that more later. So if we can do anything to get restraining orders in place or something that we can enforce, then this is the way that we do it. So here's some of our supports and resources that we have right now in place. There are some more, I'm sure. So when it comes down to, like I said, police are here, we want to charge the bad guys, we want to get them. But a lot of the time our victims are not on board with that whatsoever. So we've been learning a lot about trauma-informed approaches with victims. We'll go to the door, are you okay? If they say I'm okay, all right, you're making that connection, but sometimes you have to walk away, and I can tell you as a police officer, that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I'm gonna leave you with this quote. It was on the board at the Ontario Police College. I just took the course down there on human trafficking. It says, you don't know what you know until you know. And it's a kind of a confusing quote, and I was looking at it over and over, and then as the week unfolded, and the more I learned, the more it hit me like a ton of bricks, where there's so many calls that I went to, and I did the best that I could, but now that I know what I know, I look at those calls and I think, man, there was so much going on there, but I just didn't know. But now I do. So what I'm saying is, you don't know what you know until you know. If you learn something tonight that resonates with you, or if you take anything away, is if you see something that just doesn't seem right, then say something. Talk to a friend. Talk to the police. And because so many times in a small service, people are like, oh yeah, I didn't want to bug you guys. I didn't really think it was a big deal. But sometimes those little nuggets of information can blow a case wide open. So if you see something and you think it's suspicious, then I encourage you to bring it to someone's attention, because you never know what that can do, and it could possibly help a victim. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Susan. And before she hops off here, no, you can hop off, sorry. Okay. You can hop off. I'm just gonna throw in a plug for Crime Stoppers too. If you have a piece of information and you don't wanna go to the police, but you'd still like to report it and be anonymous, the law protects you. Crime Stoppers, you don't have to share your information, and you can still get that info over to the police as well too. So thank you again, Susan. And with that being said, I'd like to invite up Katarina McLeod. She's the founder of Rising Angels, a survivor of exploitation, sexual and physical abuse, drug addiction, forcible confinement, and domestic prostitution and trafficking. In 2008, she finally escaped the game and now works to raise awareness regarding the truth behind the industry, as well as to walk among women who, like her, want to start over and realize they cannot do it on their own. Katarina has a diploma in addictions and community service, a certificate in sexual violence, and a level 1 certificate in trauma counseling for frontline workers. She's also a mother to 4 children and living proof of a life restored. Please welcome up Katarina. Watch your step, it's kind of high.
Yeah. No, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to put my papers down here. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. You did, that was awesome. Where are you? There you are. That was awesome. So guys, this is my organization, Rising Angels. We help women who have been sexually exploited through human trafficking or prostitution. I myself am a survivor. I was sexually exploited for 15 years through prostitution and human trafficking. I'm not going to get into my story tonight. I'm going to get into education, because I think this is what we need for you to understand what's happening up here in your community. I moved up here 2 years ago from Peel being one of the biggest human trafficking hubs that there is. And I thought, wow, I'm going to come up here to Grey Bruce and it's going to be quiet and I'm going to get some, downtime. I have been so busy since I moved up here 2 years ago. There's a lot of human trafficking happening up here. So it is happening to our young girls, and we need to be aware of what's going on. This is the stereotypical pimp, what we think a pimp looks like, fur coats, big jewelry. And while there are some people who do look like that, that is not the typical pimp. The reality is anybody can be a pimp. This is the truth. And, it's like when we try to teach our kids about strangers, right? What does a stranger look like? They're scary, they're mean, they're this, they're that. It's not true. A stranger can be anybody that you don't know, and a pimp can be anybody who is going to exploit you. It can be somebody that you actually know. That was another thing that was touched on, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Ladies can be pimps too. I was recruited, actually older, average age is between 12 to 14. I was recruited at 21 years old, and I was recruited by a woman. I was in a group that was there to support women who were going through domestic violence, and I was in a very bad situation. And I met a woman in that group who was running massage parlors. And she offered me a job to work at her parlor. And at that point, I thought if I could do this and I could save money, I could get out of the situation that I was in. Now, I was very vulnerable from things that had happened to me my whole entire life up to that point. Most of the women that I work with and I walk alongside of now, including myself, have had some form of sexual abuse before the age of 16 years old that's gone unresolved. They haven't got help for it. And so that plays a really big role in the vulnerability. And for me, that was what had happened to me. That left me very vulnerable, and I ended up in a lot of different domestic violence situations. So I was recruited at 21 years old. I went into the game. I started working out of strip clubs, massage parlors, out of my car, out of apartments, out of anywhere that I could possibly work to make money. I got addicted to drugs, and it just continued from there. There are different types of pimps. So the Mac pimp, he's a business-minded and often creates dependency with women by getting them pregnant. For him, it's about business. So 10 years after I was in the game, I did get recruited by a pimp. I was sold the dream. I was like, I'm independent, this is never gonna happen, I'm never gonna get lured like that, I'm gonna control my money, my body, my choice, not realizing that I was a victim, okay? So he sold me the dream, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I ended up pregnant with 2 children from this man, and it created a dependency. I found out later that he was actually married, and he had 8 other children and 4 other women that he had gotten pregnant that was working for him. So this is kind of the chaos that started for me being human trafficked. Then we have the CEO pimp. He's the one who's behind those ads. You ever see those ads on the like poles on the street? You know, models want it, actors want it, no experience necessary. They're looking for girls who want to be stars. You know, actors, models, that kind of stuff. There will be, you know, there's times that you'll see guys in malls who will approach young girls with business cards and claim that they're modeling agents. You know, you're so pretty, you could be a model, you know, give me a call, set up a meeting, and they start luring them in that way. Then we have the Romeo pimp, which Susan had hit on, who is literally selling her the dream, manipulating her, buying her everything that she totally wants, love bombing her, and it's master manipulation. Then we have the popcorn pimp. He's a newbie. So he's new to this, just starting off, maybe has 1 or 2 women that he's running, just to kind of get a feel of what this life is like for him. So what do? They're going to play on her emotional needs. I'm not going to get into this too much because Susan had touched on it, but they do force her to rely solely on him. They do, you know, isolate her from her family, and I've seen it. So I've worked with so many women over the years, and parents as well. It's not just the girls who are affected by this crime. It's the people around who love her too, who are impacted as well. So we mentor moms, we help moms and dads whose daughters have been human trafficked. And so, you know, we see the emotional manipulation, we see the roller coaster, the back and forth, you know, these girls, you know, moms will call me all the time, they'll be like, I think my daughter is being trafficked, can you come talk to her? I'm like, I'll come talk to her. And I go talk to her and I'm saying, hey, mom's really concerned, X, Y, and Z is going on. And she's like, oh, don't worry, I'll never be as stupid as you were. And then a couple of years later, she's calling me because she needs help, right? So what are some of the ways that they trap these girls? Debt bondage is a big one. So, you know, they're taking you out, they're whining, they're dining you, they're getting your hair done, they're doing your nails, they're buying you stuff. And then they come to you and they say, hey, I've spent all my money on you and now I have no money and you've got to pay me back everything that I've spent on you, so you're going to go out and you're going to work for me. Or they will create a scenario of, I owe somebody a lot of money and if I don't pay them back, I'm going to get hurt. And because she loves him, she will fall for the manipulation of, if you just go have sex for money to help me get this back, just do it for a little while, baby. You know, she will fall for that. We're seeing students pimping out other students. So we've gone into the schools, and now what we're seeing happening is pimps are luring girls on the way home. They're following them while they're, you know, walking home from school, offering them a ride. They're saying no. They follow them the next day, offer a ride again. She finally complies, gets in the car, He starts the whole Romeo pimp scenario, and then he starts to turn her out. Then he sends her back into the school to recruit other students, other girls. Or it's the new bullying. We're not beating you up anymore for the way you look or your lunch, but you know, if you go into the bathroom, you're going to be forced to do some oral sex for 20 bucks and then give it to the person who's bullying you. So these are the types of things that we're seeing. Emotional vulnerabilities, survival sex, you know, people need to eat. Economy has gone up. Things are hard. We're watching girls fall back into the game who have been out because rent has gone through the roof. You know, when you have to choose between a place to live and food in your belly, that's not fair. And this is what's happening to these women. Family exploitation. There was a situation with one of the girls that I have been walking alongside of where her uncle started to sexually abuse her. And then he started to sell her at truck stops. He got her pregnant at 13 years old. Everybody knew what was going on. The family knew. Nothing was done about it. They actually took the baby from her and gave it to the uncle that had been selling her, and him and his wife raised the daughter, and then turned the daughter out and did the exact same thing. We mentor another girl whose sole purpose of her birth was to be exploited. Her parents got pregnant with her for the purpose of exploiting her so they could make big money off of her. Physical confinement, I don't see a lot of that. I see it more as like invisible chains or mental manipulation. You know, she's scared to leave, or she's in love with him and she really believes that he loves her. You know, and then we do see empty threats happening. You know, these guys will say, you know, if you leave, I'm going to hurt your brother, your sister, your cat, your dog. And while I have seen these pimps do certain things, majority of the time it's empty threats. But these girls don't know that, right? Sometimes they will make an example out of another girl that they have working in their stable in front of other girls so that she's scared and she won't leave. Drugs, Susan touched on that, you know, getting her to party, and now she gets addicted to drugs, and hey, you want more drugs? Guess what? You're going to have to go sell yourself in order to supply those drugs for yourself. Blackmail. We had a 15-year-old girl who made friends on Facebook. A guy befriended her. She made friends with him. And unfortunately, guys, we live in a society today where our children are disassociated from life. You know, back when we were growing up, and I know a lot of us are older, you know, riding the bikes, coming home at, you know, the street light. These kids they're not socialized. So when they meet somebody on Facebook, they really think that that's their friend. They've talked for a little bit. Hey, that's my friend. You know, this guy found out everything he possibly could find out about her, and then one day invited her to a party. Because she had been talking to him for 2 weeks, she went to this party, which turned out to be him and a couple other friends. They drugged her, they raped her, they videotaped it, and they threatened that if she didn't start doing car calls for them in the parking lot, that they would put up the video. Her not knowing her rights, for 5 years she did this. Her mom thought she had a job at Tim Hortons. So after school every day, her mom thought she was going to Tim Hortons. Instead, she was going to do car calls for these guys. Threats against her family. You know, again, you know, he's lured her in. She's fallen hook, line, and sinker for it. And now he's like, hey, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to hurt your brother. I know where he goes to school. See, they're master manipulators. They find out everything they possibly can about you. You know, who your mom and dad are, what you're struggling with at home, you know, where you live, if you have a cat, if you have a dog, your favorite color. They find out everything they possibly can, and then they use it. They use it to their benefit, and that's what happens to these girls. Where are they finding them? Well, social media, I think, is number one right now. Absolutely number one. You know, in their own neighborhood. You know, sometimes you have prostitution going on in the neighborhood. Airbnbs are huge now for sexual exploitation. Airbnbs, hotels, apartments. These guys are looking for girls in the strip clubs. You know, before, you know, I remember when I was working in the strip clubs, it was just a bunch of guys, you know, sitting in the front row watching. Now you actually have pimps who are going into the strip clubs to recruit girls who don't have pimps. So they're in there and they're watching. There's a lot of money to be made off of a woman, and I think this is something that people don't really understand. You know, when it comes to drugs and when it comes to buying and the selling of a human being, when you're taking your drugs and you're selling it, you know, you sell it, now you're done, you have to go get more supply. Get more, sell it again. With a female, with a girl, you can continually sell her over and over and over again, right? Like I talked about, in the mall, we're seeing these guys approach girls. At school, we're actually seeing some street-level prostitution happening up in Owen Sound. You know, for a while, street-level prostitution moved inside. But I'm driving in Owen Sound, and I'm seeing these girls back on the street. Like, it's starting to amp up again. You know, some people think that, you know, human trafficking and prostitution are not one and the same. For me, they are, guys. And why I'm going to say this is because if you work in a strip joint, you have to pay a DJ fee in order to dance. That's living off the avails. If you work in a massage parlor, for every customer you get, you have to pay a door fee to the owner. That is living off the avails. So they're pimping you out too. Does anybody in here know the average age of a child watching porn? Yes? Mel? It's 9. So Pornhub is free, guys. Pornhub is free, so you think about it for a second. We have 9-year-old little boys and little girls who have not reached puberty yet. They are watching pornography, and it's all about women being submissive. It's about violence. And little boys are watching this thinking this is what they're supposed to do. And little girls are watching this and thinking this is what's supposed to happen to them. It is our job as parents to educate our children. It is our job to know who our kids are talking to online. It is our job to educate our children about what is happening online. In these gaming rooms, you know, you can game worldwide. There's predators in there who are looking for kids. My son's a big gamer, and I remember, you know, I'm very raw, real. My kids know everything I've been through. And so, you know, he came to me one day on one of the gamings. He's like, Mom, there's this guy talking to me, and he's asking me to send him pictures. But he wouldn't have come and told me that if I didn't make him feel safe enough that he could. And that's what we need to do. We need to make our children feel safe, that it's okay to come and tell us things that they think we're going to give trouble to them for, right? You know, OnlyFans, sugar babying, this is the new thing. And unfortunately, these girls are thinking because, you know, OnlyFans is behind a camera and nobody is touching them, that they're not being sexually exploited or selling themselves. But it is prostitution. If you are doing anything sexual for money, that is prostitution. Sugar babying now is the new thing. It's become cool. And this is the problem, is that our kids are living in pimp culture. And by the time they get lured in, they didn't even see it happening because it's so normalized. It's really cool to be a sugar baby now. To have some guy who's paying for you and buying you things and doing all of that stuff, but he's going to expect sex from you. I know a ton of sugar babies. I know a ton of girls who do OnlyFans. So there's a big problem happening in society where we are now normalizing what's going on with our kids. They are so desensitized from sex. You know, I talk about my boys a lot because it's my boys who would be in school and say, hey, Mom, do you know that it's normal to have a main girlfriend and a side girlfriend? That's pimp lingo. So our kids are living in this culture that is so over-sexualized, and they want to fit in, and they want to be cool, and this is what makes them vulnerable. We need to teach our kids what different types of intimacy really looks like. Our kids think that intimacy is sex. It's way beyond that. And they need to understand what healthy intimacy looks like so that they will see the red flags, so that they will know when they're getting into a relationship, if these things aren't marking, you know, if you can't check it off, there's something wrong. I had the opportunity to stand here today and tell you my horror story. And I didn't want to. Because you can hear all the stories you want. But if you don't know what to do or what to look for, you're not going to be able to help your kids. And me being in this line of work, that's what it's about now. Is I want to be able to help somebody. I want to be able to save somebody else's kid so they don't have to go through what I went through. I was the extreme. I spent 15 years in the game. 15 years being used and abused over and over and over again because I thought that is all there was for me. I thought that's what I deserved. I had low self-esteem, you name it. All those things that Susan talked about, that was me. That was me. I came from unhealthy. You know, if you see something going on, you need to say something. Instead of just saying, oh, you know, they're a troubled kid or they're a bad kid, there is no such thing as a bad kid. If a kid is reacting a certain way, it's because something is happening, something is going on. Ask the right questions. If somebody would have asked me, if somebody would have said, hey, Kat, are you okay? What's going on? When I was a little girl and I started wetting the bed and acting out in school and beating people up, instead of people just saying, wow, she's a problem child, if somebody would have said, Kat, is something wrong? Are you okay? Maybe then I would have felt safe enough to say, hey, I'm being sexually abused. But nobody asked the right question. They labeled me. And I grew up being this troubled kid. I know warning signs were hit on, and I just want to hit on a couple more. So obviously the unexplained money, clothes, gifts. Like I just said, she's a good student, you know. She has a great peer group. She hangs around people, and all of a sudden she stops. She doesn't show up for the things that she used to show up for. You're noticing, you know, maybe she's losing weight, she's got bruises on her, or she's doing drugs and she never did it before, or she has a boyfriend that she doesn't let anybody meet. You know, I can remember moms telling me, you know, when I should have seen the signs. I would come home from work and I could tell that my daughter had been through my lingerie drawer, and her boyfriend was always meeting her down the street, and I never questioned it. Why? When things are wrong, there's signs always. One girl we had, she got lured from school, and every day she would take the bus. And once she would get dropped off by the bus, the pimps would pick her up and they'd bring her to work all day long, and then they'd bring her back to the bus so they could bring her home. And she started to act out in school. Drugs started, you know, to be introduced to her. She wasn't involved in all the things she was involved with before. And instead of the school asking the right questions, they kicked her out. And you know what? Not once did they call home and tell her mom that she wasn't attending school. She was labeled. When everything was found out and she was asked, it was asked of them if she could go back to school to finish her high school, they said no. They didn't understand. So education is key. All of a sudden she, has a job. And she says, oh, she has a job, but she's affording things that a minimum wage job is not going to give you. That's a big sign. That's a really big sign. Or you're noticing she's having relationships with older men. As a little girl, I can remember, 15, 16, 17, when older men gave me attention, oh my gosh, it made me feel so good. It made me feel so loved and so wanted and all of those things. And that was my issues. That was my daddy hole that I needed to be filled. So I ended up dating guys twice my age. And it got myself in a lot of trouble. It took me 15 years, guys, to get out. I don't want that to be your daughter. It's taken years and years of healing, and I'll probably be healing for the rest of my life. But today I just want to come here and give you the knowledge that I have so that you don't have to go through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. Very powerful. Very powerful listening to Katarina. And we'll keep on with that, and I'll invite Melanie Knights up. Melanie has been dedicated to the anti-human trafficking field since 2010, serving in a range of frontline and leadership roles. Her experience includes first response along law enforcement, long-term case management, program development, grant writing, training service providers across Ontario. The list does not end. With a background in healthcare and addiction, she brings a holistic, trauma-informed perspective to her work. As a survivor herself, Melanie offers unique insight and a deep understanding of the issues she addresses. She served on the Canadian Women's Foundation 2-year task force on trafficking of girls and women in Canada and contributed to the holistic harm reduction components to the MCIS online training at helpingtraffickedpersons.org. She currently serves as the executive director of Bridging Gaps AHT, a survivor-led organization. Please welcome Melanie.
I didn't do a fancy presentation. I have, my little bio there was saying, I've spent 15 years working in this sector, and I've done just about everything in this sector. Started in GTA. I had no idea, though, that the work I started with in the GTA was going to land me in anti-trafficking work. I've been out of the game for 25 years now, and I actually escaped to Grey Bruce in 2000. When I escaped, I was escaping bike clubs. I was being sexually exploited and had been for 3 years at that point by bike clubs, and I was being held hostage and had an opportunity to leave the area that I was in to help a friend who was also in the game at that point in time, but I was allowed to come and stay with her for 3 days, and then I was going to be picked back up. I knew when I was given the opportunity to leave my original area that I was not going to come back. No matter what, I was not going back when that ride was coming for me 3 days later. And I didn't. That led to 6 months, approximately 6 months of individuals looking for me in the region, coming to collect me and protect all of their bits and pieces that I had as far as information and stuff. So my story, I don't want to, stories are long and sordid. You need to be able to make sure crowds are able to go home and not be vicariously traumatized at the end of things. So I will touch on the important pieces of my story that led to my escape, the Great Escape in 2000, and then what led up to my work. So as we saw in the police presentation there, the risk factors, I had an ACE score, which is an Adverse Childhood Events rating system, I had an ACE score of 9. It only goes to 10. So I'm an immigrant here in Canada, came with a very unstable family, father with substance abuse issues, and a step monster, as I used to call her, generations of maternal wounds that was kind of unleashed upon me as a child growing up. And with a father that was in the music industry in England in the 70s, and that led to an absence, substance use in the home, all of that. Came to Canada in 1980, broken home, found myself, I was a chronic runaway by the time we got to Canada. I was 8 years old in 1980, and the police used to pick me up wherever they found me and would just take me right back home. Never ever asked why I didn't want to be at home. So things have changed, and things have definitely changed in that area now. If police are picking up a chronic runaway, they're going to be asking why that kid's not wanting to be at home. So, but they just take me back home. So I spent about 4 years doing that, and by the time I was 12, I was substance using, street involved, and not in heading in a pretty poor direction. I had no protective factors here in the country. All my family was overseas still, and I was doing the best to survive as a kid here in a foreign country 3,000 miles away from any other family. By the time I was 13, I wasn't just substance using and street involved, I was now becoming gang involved. So back in the 80s, and there's certainly folks old enough to remember the 80s, we had quite a large skinhead population throughout a lot of Canada, and that became my family for a long time. They took me in, took me under their wing, and we had a lot of gang activity across the country with skinheads and various other groups and organized crime pieces that they were connected to then. So that was here in Ontario. I knew how to do what I had to do to survive on the streets. I had nowhere to sleep. I had nowhere to grab meals from. I was addicted, and these folks provided a sense of belonging for me, and on occasions places to stay and criminal activity to be involved in. So that would earn me food and shelter and places to get cleaned up. So at 15, I decided to run across the country. Not literally, but hitchhike across the country, and it was a road trip from hell. Truck drivers that would, feed you drugs and then kick you out on the highway, anywhere between here and Alberta. Ended up in North Bay, left in a ditch, and from there we went to, I was picked up, my next ride out, I was picked up by what I always called a white creeper van with a massive marijuana grow op in the back, and I traveled the whole duration of the country in that van. We were dropped in Edmonton. We had picked up another girl on the way. I got dropped off in Edmonton. And in Edmonton in the 80s, there was a lot of gang activity. Edmonton was the LA of Canada in the 80s, so there was a lot of Bloods and Crips, which come up out of LA gang life. Settled in Edmonton, and it's just like Calgary was always the Texas of Canada, Edmonton was the LA of Canada. We also had a large white Aryan resistant skinhead population out in Alberta at that point in time, especially in Edmonton. And so I kind of had my family out there. I would like to preface that none of my targets were ever racially motivated. If I was ever involved in any kind of violent attacks, they were always against white girls, because they were the girls that got to go home to mom and dad at the end of the day. They had a family, they had a home, they had parents that cared about them. I did not care for those girls at all. I didn't have any of that stuff. So by the time I was out there, Edmonton, the Bloods and Crips, the way things operated with them, girls have a little more fluidity with gang involvement. With boys, you're kind of jumped in. There's a jumping in process and a jumping out process, which pretty much boils down to you're beaten up to get in and you're beaten up to get out. Girls have a little more fluidity because we have other things we can use to move from gang to gang. So one of those things is sex. And you can be traded from gang to gang as well. So with girls as well in gangs, girls are less likely to be pulled over by police or targeted by police for drugs and guns. So with gangs, my situation, if I wasn't being turned out for sex to make money, I was running guns and drugs across the city. The more guns and drugs I ran across the city, the less sex I would have to do. So that was my saving grace. In all of that, in Edmonton, I got really sick. I'm not going to go into a whole pile of details on things, but I got really sick when I was in Edmonton. Found my way to a shelter there and thought I had a safe space to be in. That shelter, I met a social worker. Now, my original trauma was all maternal. Separation from birth mom, birth land, a stepmother that was, had generations of her own maternal wounds. So my trauma, and she was also my primary abuser, emotionally, physically, psychologically, sexually, all of that as a child. So I'd never had a woman that had really ever cared for me at all. So when I met this social worker in this shelter, who took me in under her wing, she's also the social worker that took me to the hospital. She also came to see me at the hospital every single day while I was in there. And it was great. All of a sudden, I've got a woman that cares about me. Never, ever had this before. She asked me if I wanted to go to British Columbia with her. I said, absolutely. I've made it this far. May as well go to BC. So, set a date. I got out of the hospital. We were set to leave a few days later. Got my bag from the shelter. Thought I was getting away from everything. All looked good. And we left Edmonton, and she took me to a man camp up in Great Slave Lake in Alberta. So when we talk about transient populations pouring into Grey Bruce, contract workers, all of that sort of stuff, I'm like, it's kind of like a little man camp up here. A lot of contract workers, right? So I was taken to that man camp, and from there I was taken to a bike clubhouse in interior British Columbia, and I was sold out of there for a period of time. All I remember of the man camp is Grizzly Adams walking out that trailer door, and the next thing I remember is waking up in the Rocky Mountains. I always figure my memories I will get back if they serve a purpose. If it's part of my greater growth and healing, then I will get those memories back. If they do not serve a greater purpose, then I don't need them for anything. So, but I also figure I've got the tools and the know-how to deal with that stuff now. So, yes, man camp in Alberta, then over to British Columbia to a bike clubhouse, and I escaped from there. I was taken to Wolco, for those that remember Wolco. And do you remember the days in Wolco where you used to walk in and on the one wall was a whole entire missing children? There was pictures of missing children all over that wall when you walked into Wolco. You don't ever see that anymore. It's like, so what, where are all the missing kids being posted now? Where's the awareness of all of that, right? So She took me to Woolco, and I can remember her putting all these clothes in. So now I othered myself for years. I always said, well, I'm not one of those girls. I don't dress like that. I was a skinhead. I had a uniform. That's what I wore. I wore my 14-hole Doc Martens, my little black skirt. I had 3 T-shirts that I swapped it up, a Crucified Skinhead, a Sid and Nancy shirt, and a Charles Manson shirt, and that's what I wore. That was my life for about 7 years. So as we're in Woolco, and she's putting like sheer shirts and spandex and stilettos, and I'm like, no, I'm not wearing that stuff. No way am I wearing. I'm not one of those girls. I don't do this for money. Do this for drugs, for a place to stay, something to eat, place to get cleaned up, very much survival on the streets. But now that I'm in a bike clubhouse and I'm expected to look a certain way, I need to have different clothes, don't I? So, and I'm still like, I'm not wearing these. Her fatal mistake was giving me the money to pay for this stuff while she went to grab a pack of smokes. And I took that money and ran. And the Greyhound station was right next door to Woolco. And I hopped on that bus to Calgary. I had just pulled in, got to Calgary. I then hitchhiked back up to Edmonton, got back to the shelter, and the shelter workers looked at me and went, are the drugs no good in BC? And that was their response. And I was just like, and I can remember standing on the doorstep of the shelter thinking, you have no idea where I've been or what has happened. And the first thing you've asked me is about the drugs in BC and whether they were, good enough for me or not. So I did end up staying there a bit longer, and obviously, word gets around, people are back in town, all of that, you're picked up by gangs again. I will say a woman showed me how to work the streets in Edmonton. It was a woman that recruited me on the streets. Edmonton had the strip and the drag. The women that wore the clothes worked the strip, and us kids worked the drag. I was 15. And it was a woman that showed me how to work that. So I was out there for quite a while, ended up making my way back to Ontario about a year later or so, and once I got back to Ontario, I was then picked up by another bike club. Someone that picked me up on the street. He was 17 years older than me, and he pimped me out for 4 years. I got pregnant at 19 with his baby, and did everything I could to make sure that my child never knew who he was or how he came here. So that didn't work out very well in the long run. All worked out in the end, but we certainly had a rough road to go within all of that. I kept my son. He's now 33. He and is, we had to deal with all of our intergenerational trauma within all of that. And he's, he certainly went through quite an ordeal himself. I used to, he'd ask me about his dad, and he did actually meet his dad years later. Not that he was a dad in any capacity or a father or anything, but he did actually get to meet him, and he met him 3 times and said he never wanted to see him again. So this fella's since passed. I was like, thank you. And, we kind of got on with life after that. So, but I was 15 when he first picked me up. So, and I was 19 the last time I'd seen him. So, in the 80s, here in Ontario, the goal was to not end up in Thunder Bay, because girls that went to Thunder Bay didn't come home. So that was always the goal out on the streets. When you have nowhere to go, and you are doing what you have to do to survive out there, you're aware of the places you definitely don't want to go. I can go there, there, and there. I can navigate that, but I don't want to go way up there, because I don't ever see anybody come back from way up there. They just kind of disappear. So, and it was interesting, because when I landed in this work years later, the story was very much the same. Girls don't want to, you don't go to Thunder Bay. You don't end up, if you go to Thunder Bay, you don't come back. So some things haven't changed in all of this. So, yeah, where did I get to? So my son, so I was 19. I got out of the game when I was 19. So that was my first turning point. It wasn't my first turning. My first turning point was getting out of jail when I was 17. I ended up going to jail for a fraud charge that was not mine, connected to a pimp who had stolen some stuff, used some stuff. I was charged for it. Part of my trip out to Alberta was avoiding those charges, so when I got picked up by police in Alberta and they ran my name and I had warrants in Ontario, thing is, if you do favors for people, you get left alone. So when you start asking girls who their clients are, they will tell you that they're cops, doctors, lawyers, judges, men with money, men in perceived positions of power and control, right? So I got myself out of, free flights back to Ontario by favors with police officers out there. So back here in Ontario, though, so I got picked up, ended up in jail. That was back when kids used to go to jail. Barton Street had a whole entire second floor for young offenders. It was no different than adult jail. Exactly. Huge deterrent. Fantastic idea. Bring it back. So, never wanted to go back to jail again. So I wanted to get out of the game. Wanted to get my life together. I got out of jail. This is just before I got pregnant with my son. So I'd gotten away from them. I had a friend invite me to come and stay at her home, and her parents were going to let me stay at their place, but I had to go to school. I wasn't allowed to do drugs, and I had to go to school. I was like, awesome, yep, okay. Got no education at this point. I've been off the map since first semester of grade 9. Yes, love to go back to school, and like your parents are going to let me live at their house. Okay. I don't know what that looks like, and I got there, and it's like people have meals together and talk to each other, and like this is just weird. So I went back to school, but in all of that, I was still being exploited. So I got a phone call, and I had to go. And it's easier if you go, because if you don't go and they come looking for you, it's far worse. So I left, and that was one of the last times I'd seen my son's father, was this night. And that was a whole bunch of these individuals, plus individuals from Thunder Bay. My objective that night was just to get out of the house alive. So anyway, second turning point. Getting out of jail was my first turning point, wanting out of the game. How do I get out of this? How do I stay out of it? Even though I'm still being exploited. Second turning point, getting pregnant. Do not want my child to grow up in this at all. How do I get out of it? How do I keep my kid out of it? All of this stuff. Ended up meeting my second son's father, totally different character. Peace, love, and happiness, hippie, just off Grateful Dead tour. Yeah, totally different vibe to him. My whole crowd became his crowd. And so when our relationship broke down, I had no supports. I was still on my own. You go back to what you know. I'd met a fella who had a tattoo shop. Got tattoos, and so the tattoo shop was kind of a normal environment for me, and another biker, and this is leading up to my escaping up here, but these are the individuals I got involved with in the city I was in. And he was exploiting me. I would have to look like $1 million, and he'd parade me around the room or have me parade myself around the bar, and I would pray nobody would talk to me, because if they did, he would take me home and beat me and rape me. And that was how he functioned, and I would be expected the next weekend to look my best so he could show me off to everybody. And I would pray that nobody talk to me, looked at me, because if they did, once again. So self-gratification for him through my exploitation, right? So he wasn't selling me for money, but he was exploiting me within the crowd, 2 people, for his own purposes. What happened then was I had received a phone call one night. It was an incredibly violent situation, an incredibly violent relationship. And he had called one night to tell me that he was coming to kill me. And I phoned the house that he was at to say, why did you let him leave like that? What happened after there broke the code. There's a code within these groups of folks, and that broke the code, and this individual came and saved me from this fella that was his friend. But in turn, this fella then took me hostage and was sexually exploiting me. And I owed him because he had saved me from this other guy. So this is the fella who eventually I had this opportunity. I had a friend up here who lived in a rinky-dink little town just south of Hanover. And she'd been in the game for years as well, but her old man was friends with this fella who was literally holding me hostage. And she had been for some little surgery and wanted me to come and help her while she was recovering, and I was allowed to go. And as soon as he said, yep, I'll take you up, pick you up in 3 days. All right, that's my escape. This is my great escape. So I packed a little backpack. I was only leaving for 3 days. I couldn't take too much, couldn't look obvious in any way, shape, or form. So packed up what I needed for those 3 days. And then I spent about 6 months hiding up here. So I'd hear bikes pull into town every weekend, and I'd be over fences and through cornfields and off to a little house in Ayton that belonged to a friend of mine that I had met up here. So that was my escape. Now, that was in the year 2000. I was 87 pounds. I'd been waking up to an ounce of cocaine and a $100 bill every morning for almost 3 years. Thought I looked fantastic. I looked absolutely horrific. I was in terrible shape. I knew that if I didn't leave, they were either going to kill me or I was going to kill myself, because it was the only way I was going to get out of this. So I managed nicely up here in 2000. This area wasn't anybody's turf, so there was no kind of. There certainly was crime up here. Grey Bruce has been our largest cash crop has been marijuana for years up here. So, produced more marijuana up here than British Columbia at times. So. But there was no organized, I don't say there wasn't any organized crime, but there certainly wasn't organized crime to the extent it is now. In the year 2000, there was a bike club seeking this territory. They got the territory. This is now their turf. So those folks have control of this place now as far as kind of what comes in and what comes out and who runs what in and out of the territory. So when I got out of things, I got away from all of that before they took this territory. This territory, though, had a whole bunch of old hillbillies and a whole bunch of hippies and hillbillies that pretty much ran everything up here to that point. They weren't into having the little boys club take 10% of any of their hard work. So those old hippies and hillbillies kind of took me in under their wing and provided me the safe space to kind of deal with some stuff. We ended up running into some of those fellas with the clubs about a year and a half, 2 years later, and they just looked at those guys and said, leave her alone, and that was it. But I'd been away long enough that they knew I was not going to talk about anything at that point. So I never thought in 2000 that any of my story would be worth anything to anybody. What I wanted to do was get my 2 children back. That was my whole goal. Right from the minute I got up here and knew that I wasn't going anywhere, I was going to get my kids back, my 2 oldest boys. So I spent about 1.5 years stabilizing myself. I actually stayed at a fella's house where women didn't play men's sports. That's what he said, which meant women didn't drink and women didn't do coke. I was like, this is perfect. This is my controlled environment. I need this. So, no, he wasn't exactly a lovely fella, but he provided me that controlled environment. So he was never home. He was off on bike trips. So, you know, I had an old farmhouse to myself 90% of the time. He'd come back for a couple of days, and then he'd be off on another big bike trip. And I'd be like, all right, this is great. So as long as, you know, I had the house clean, it was 1950s in the house, 1961 in the Bel Air, and outside of that, we were in the real world. So kind of functioned like that for 1.5 years, but it provided me a space where I knew I could not use, and I knew nobody was going to make me use. And he also wasn't exploiting me. All I had to do was take care of his house. It was perfect. So I spent about 1.5 years stabilizing myself, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to be like 30 years old. I was 27 when I escaped. I was not too far from almost being 30, thinking I need my kids. I need to go back to school. I got first semester of grade 9. So I went back to school, got my PSW certificate, and went into healthcare from there. Spent 9 years in healthcare up here. It was beautiful. Nobody knew me. I had a clean slate. I had no story up here. I was this girl that came up from the city, didn't have to tell anybody anything. So I did that, and then I met my husband, who I've been with now for 16 years, and I went back down to the city with him. Went back to school and got my certificate. I got my diploma in addictions and community service work and went to work in the Dundas-Sherborne neighborhood of Toronto. Highest concentration of crack cocaine users within a 6-block radius in all of Canada. I was like, these are my people. This is perfect. I can do this, love this. Then I had a social worker show up, and I had to take her for outreach. And I'm like, oh, I'll take the social worker out. At that point in time, I really hadn't connected my own pieces with why I don't care for the social worker. I thought I'm just going to feed her to the wolves out there. And she's actually one of my closest friends now. But it was at that point, after about 6 weeks of taking her through the neighborhood doing harm reduction work, she said to me, we've secured funding for the first federally funded anti-trafficking program in Ontario. Will you be my case manager? And all of a sudden, my whole life made sense. I have been groomed for this. And I also tell her she's who lured and groomed me into this work. She says, don't tell people that. I tell people that. So she is who lured and groomed me into this work. So, and that's kind of where my journey started with this work, and that all began in York Region, and since then, like I said, I've worked all kinds of different aspects of this work: human trafficking, sexual exploitation. I don't have time to get into. I don't have time to get into the sort of things we saw in the GTA. The GTA was horrific for stuff. It's no different up here, though, and we are no different than the States either. So, you know, we think we've got all these different things going on, or it's not like that here, and it's different, and no, it's not. We also have a huge shift in demographics up here. So, you know, the last 5 years, it's been interesting to see the change in demographics. I look at the cases in the GTA that I did, and I worked 3 forced marriage cases down there. That's something that has come to this region. Child marriage is also something that needs to be on the radar. Forced labor. So it's, you know, botchabazi. I know I've directed somebody, if you have military friends that have done tours of duty, ask them what botchabazi is. Definitely needs to be on the radar up here. So, but all of it, criminal exploitation. You know, I was not only exploited for sex and trafficked for sex, but I was used for running guns and drugs. You know, I had to resolve a pile of that stuff with guns over the years, or I never would have been able to do the work I did with the police. You know, to be with, you know, and I'm now, you know, I'm also a licensed gun owner myself. So, you know, but that took years of work resolving that stuff. So we talk about recovery, and I'm like, what are we recovering to? And we're recovering to like that abused 24-year-old, or the abused 17-year-old, or the abused like 4-year-old. For some of us, it's a journey of self-discovery. So it's, you know, recovery is it's a big question. Recovering to what? When really it should really be about self-discovery. Nothing's ever the same afterwards. So, my time is up. Yes. I can talk for days on this. So, and between Kat and I, we've got 60 collective years, 30 in the game collectively with very different stories, and then 30 years of professional experience between the two of us. So we've been on the front lines of this issue for 15 years, starting in the GTA. There was a handful of us. And it's still, I was saying to the police earlier, you know, where is the next generation of leaders? I'm interested in succession, and where is that next generation of leaders, right? I don't want to be 60 doing this still. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Another powerful story. That's a term I'm going to use to refer tonight because that feels right, and it feels the best way to describe the experiences and the expertise that we have in the room tonight. So next up, I'd like to invite Debbie Caswell. She's a mother of 3 daughters, and her journey took a painful turn when one of them became a victim of human trafficking. That experience changed her life and deepened her commitment to helping others find safety, hope, and justice. For more than 35 years, Debbie has worked in social services. I work with Debbie, she is wonderful, supporting people living in poverty, with disabilities, and those facing some of life's hardest challenges. Today, she uses both her professional experience as well as her personal story to raise awareness, break stigma, and bring compassion into conversations that matter. Please welcome Debbie.
Thanks, Alexa. Ooh, you're right, Kat, this is loud. Good evening, everyone. So I'm here as a speaker, but I am a mom. I'm a mom true and true. I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is 33. I have a 30-year-old, and then I have my youngest who just celebrated her champagne birthday in August, 24 years old. I remember back in 2018 as a mom attending a human trafficking workshop at the high school in Meaford, and Mel was one of the speakers, and I always thought, oh, that's never gonna happen in my family. I will never ever see that happen. Well, here I am tonight, standing in front of all of you, sharing my story. And my story doesn't take turns to Toronto or out west. My story is totally Grey County. I live in Meaford. My daughter lives in Owen Sound, and her story started, maybe I'll give you a bit of background about her. She was the life of school. She was a straight A student, honor roll in grade 9 and 10, competitive gymnast. She had it going for her. Of my 3 girls in grade 8, she was the one that would stand there and go, Mom, I got it all. No one's gonna stop me. She wanted to be a child psychologist, or maybe an orthodontist or an optometrist. She never ever got her grade 12. In grade 10, she met a boy who I don't think was intentionally trafficking her, but listening to everything tonight, he was grooming her. He was abusive. She had bruises on her all the time, but I think she thought she could change him. And back in grade 8, she got, I always call it the Miss Congeniality Award. Meaford Community School used to offer an award. They called it the Chris Fligg Memorial Award, and it went to the student who was the friend to all the students. And I remember her grade 8 teacher standing up on grade 8 graduation saying that my daughter Morgan was the girl who befriended everyone, even the kids no one else wanted to befriend. So her first boyfriend was that boy. As soon as I mentioned his name to anyone, they went, "Oh, really? That's who your daughter is dating?" It was a very traumatic relationship for her. Her dad and I were separated, I will say that. We tried to get her away from this boy, but the more we tried, the more we drove her to him. She was more in love with him every day, every time we said, "He's not good for you." So eventually I thought, okay, what we're doing is not working. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results? I had to change my game with her. So I started to accept this boy, invited him to my house for Christmas, but hoping that would work, but it didn't work. It just continued. So from the time she was 15 till she was 21, she dated this boy. I don't know how many times he was charged. He went to youth detention. He'd come back. They would get back together. They had restraining orders. They would break those restraining orders. I remember once she got caught in his apartment in Owen Sound, and the police came in, took him away, and he was charged with breach of probation because of the restraining order. She felt bad, but it didn't keep her away from him. She kept going back and back and back until one night it got really bad. It was probably the worst fight of the relationship, and she called it quits with him. And I was like, yes, she's free. This is gonna stop it. And then 2 days later, she's like, "Mom, I met a new boyfriend, and he's awesome, and he's gonna be so much better than so-and-so." And I'm like, yes. Well, at that point in time, she did not have her grade 12, but she was working full-time at Tim Hortons, and she was a great employee. Louise Harshman loved her as an employee, but all of a sudden, she stopped showing up for work, or if she showed up for work, she'd be high. She started showing up with Helly Hansen jackets. How do you afford one of those on a Tim Hortons salary when you're paying $1,200 a month in rent? You don't. She had more Nike shoes than probably Sports Check had. And it just kept going and going and going. I remember seeing the word intuition in one of those fancy PowerPoints. I had intuition. I remember going to my car one lunch hour and calling Mel up and going, "Mel, this is what I'm seeing in my daughter. I see this, this, and this." Mel's like, "Debbie, you gotta call the police. You gotta report this. Like, she is being groomed." Ironically, that day, my daughter called me. She needed some groceries, and she wanted me to drive her to groceries after I finished work. By the way, I work at the legal clinic in Owen Sound, so I work with people who live in poverty. And so I picked her up. We went for groceries. We pull up in front of her apartment, and there's an Owen Sound police cruiser sitting in front of her apartment. She looks at me. She's like, "Mom, I didn't do anything." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you know what? Get out, get your groceries. I'll watch my rearview mirror. If the police officer gets out, I'll get out and we'll talk to him together." She's like, "Okay." So she gets out, grabs her groceries. Police officer gets out, so I get out. I go over, and the police officer says to her, "You know what, your neighbor called us for a wellness check. He hadn't seen you out in a while." She looks at the police officer and she's like, "Yeah, my new boyfriend doesn't like me hanging out or saying hi to my neighbor because he's afraid I have a thing with him." The police officer laughed and said to my daughter, "Well, I know your neighbor, and he's probably old enough to be your dad." While working in social services, her neighbor had been my client at one time, and I chuckled and went, "Well, I know her neighbor too, and I know her dad, and he's way older than her dad, but that doesn't stop things from happening." So she grabbed her groceries, went into her apartment, and I said to the police officer, "You know, it's a little ironic because I just had a conversation today, and I need to reach out to you guys." And he's like, "Why?" I'm like, "I think she's being trafficked." He's like, "What makes you think that?" So I started naming all the things I had seen changing in her looks, the lack of communication with me, like she only communicated with me if she really needed something. Prior to that, we used to go for lunch 1 or 2 times a week. We'd go to like Wendy's or Harvey's, pick up some burgers, go sit down by the waterfront in Owen Sound, have our lunch together. That had all stopped with this new boyfriend. So the police officer went, Yeah, you're right. So he passed my name and my phone number on to the officer with the Owen Sound Police Force that was dealing with anti-human trafficking. Ironically, I sat on the anti-human trafficking committee through work, and I knew this police officer. So she called me, we had a chat. I told her, she's like, yeah, you know what, I think your hunches are right. And then my daughter had also shared some things with one of her sisters, so I said to the police officer, well, you know what, she's had some conversations with her sister too. So the police officer asked for my other daughter's phone number. I gave it to her. So we talked, and she's like, so to get her, we can't just go in and charge him with human trafficking. We have to have your daughter admit she's being trafficked. She goes, so we need to talk to her. Well, with her first boyfriend and everything that went on, she really, no offense to you police officers back there, but she really did not like police officers. Actually, one day she told one police officer in Owen Sound, remember, I work at Tim Hortons, I make your coffee. And she got moved from the Tim Hortons at the top of 10th Street to the Tim Hortons by Canadian Tire. I told her she couldn't say things like that, but yeah. So I said, you know, it's going to be a hard sell getting her to talk to any police officer, except one. There was one young police officer in Owen Sound. His name's Nathan Curry, and for some reason, my daughter really, really liked him. And so I did say, you know what? She does have a relationship with Nathan. She does like Nathan. Nathan can stop her on the streets, and she'll talk to Nathan. So the officer said, well, I'll try talking to her, and if I need be, I will pull him in, and we can go that way. So all sounded good, but then Owen Sound was hit with a real wave of crimes. There were a number of murders, a couple of drug-related murders, and then, of course, the one that we're all hearing about most recently, Sharif. So she kind of got pushed to the back burner, and the police officer has approached me since then and said, what's happening with her? Like, I'm really sorry, but like, you know, we only have so much manpower, and I get that. But she did break away from that boyfriend after a couple of really nasty fights with him. She had been living in one apartment, moved to a second apartment with her assumed trafficker. Then they broke up, and she moved back to her first apartment. She'd not been paying rent. She got an eviction notice, but she had a new job. So we went to the LTB, we got her a payment plan, and she got to stay in her apartment. A few months later, she stopped paying rent. She got evicted. But in the time that she was waiting to be evicted, she kept having boyfriend after boyfriend, dealer after dealer. My kids will tell you that I know almost everybody in Owen Sound. Probably not quite that much, but I know a lot of people in Owen Sound. I had heard through the grapevine that the police were watching my daughter's apartment. So she gets evicted. Anytime I went to pick her up, there were like people coming and going. So I know there was drug dealing going on. I think she was probably dealing herself, and she got evicted. And I thought, great, because when she gets evicted, what does she ask? She asks me to move back home to my house, Meaford. Maybe less drugs than Owen Sound, but she still found them. But she did try to get herself clean. And then about 2 weeks after she moved home, she went out one Saturday morning, and she opened my front door, stepped outside, stepped back inside, and went, hey, Mom, do you have any naloxone? I'm like, I sure do. She goes, yeah, where I'm going, there isn't any naloxone. I'm like, you're going to use? She's like, yeah. So she left. She came back in about an hour or so. And then she tells me that a friend of hers is coming by in a bit. I'd had a big tree taken down in my yard, and he was going to come take the wood away for me. And so he comes knocking on the door, and he says, well, she says she's going to help me move the wood. I go up to her room. There she is, laying on her bed, gray, not breathing. Naloxone kit laying between her legs. So I use the naloxone. She comes around, call 911, paramedics come. I think there were some issues. It took them a long time once they loaded her in the ambulance to get her to the hospital. We go to the hospital. She has 8 people with her. Her one sister, who is a nurse, told her, you know what? There's never 8 people for an overdose in an emergency room. You are very lucky. Like, you have a lot of us behind you. That day, she talked about going to detox, and she went to detox the next day. She stayed in detox for 30 hours, and she walked away. I feel guilty because about 4 hours before she left detox, she'd asked for her cell phone, and I had taken it to her. The only good thing is she had an iPhone, and I had Find My Friends on her iPhone. So I check her location, and I see it's not at the detox center in Owen Sound. I call the detox. They're like, yeah, we have something to tell you. She walked away. They're like, well, actually, she ran out the driveway and hopped in a taxi. So I check her location again, and it's at one of the trashy motels in Owen Sound. So I get on the phone to my ex-husband's new wife, and we decide that we're going to go to Owen Sound because we think that that friend who came to get my wood the day she overdosed was probably where she was with, because we assumed he was a John. He was much older than her. He was in his 50s, married with a stepdaughter the same age as my daughter. So I knew what his vehicles were. We went to Owen Sound. We drove through the motel parking lot, couldn't find his vehicle. We knew she was in the motel. We went knocking on the motel door. The motel owner would not tell us whether she was there or not. I knew she was there. So she told us we needed to call the police. So we called the police to come and do a wellness check on her. She came and they did a wellness check, and she said she was fine. My ex-husband's wife, new wife, said she drives like a blacked out big SUV. So we're sitting in the motel parking lot in this big blacked out SUV, almost looking like we should be police officers, talking to the 2 Owen Sound City police officers, and my daughter walks by with her dealer, not even realizing that it's her mom and her stepmom in the car. But on the other hand, she does not know that across the road in a pickup truck is her one sister and a boyfriend, and they follow the taxi that my daughter gets into to try to talk my daughter into going back to detox. She would not go back into detox, but she stayed with this dealer. They lived different places. I'm pretty sure she was dealing for him. And then that was in June, and in November, she had a fight with that dealer, and then she was going to be homeless. I offered for her to come back home. She refused. She then, all of a sudden, said that somebody on the side of the road picked her up and put her in one of the better motels in Owen Sound for 5 days. I was kind of like, who's going to do this? Like, that's an awfully kind-hearted person. But anyways, I didn't want to doubt her, but I do believe now she was probably not telling me the whole truth. That was the end of November. The 1st of December, she called me to tell me that her dealer had her bank cards and took her full OW check out of the bank. I told her she needed to call the police. She wouldn't. I called the dealer up, and I'm like, what's this? You're stealing her check? He said some not nice words to me, but he told me that she'd used $1,200 worth of his drugs the 5 days she was in the motel, so that was his payment. From there, she ended up with another boyfriend who, the one day she called me at work and asked me to pick her up and drop her off at the methadone clinic. So I did. And on the way to the methadone clinic, she's like, Mom, you got to call Crime Stoppers. He's holding girls against their will. I'm like, are you going back? She's like, no, I'm not going back. I'm like, okay. So I called Crime Stoppers, checked later, because I checked online, checked later. They had been there then they couldn't find anything. Who ends back up at his place later that night but my daughter? Then fast forward to Christmas Day of 2024. I wake up, it's about 7:30. At 6:30, I had a text message from her. I was thinking, yay, she's wishing me a Merry Christmas. No, her text message was, call 911. It's an hour after the message. I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I called the Owen Sound Police Department. They sent a police officer by the residence. Again, I knew where she was. I had Find My Friends. And she talked to the police officers and she told them that she was okay. 3 days later, 9:53, December 28th, never a time I'll forget, I had a call from Owen Sound Police Services come across my phone. It happened to be a police officer that I had talked to about my daughter in the past. Synchronicities can be wonderful. And he told me they had pulled my daughter from a home, from that home. Sorry. And it was a domestic situation. And he said that my daughter wanted to talk to me. So she gets on the phone and she's like, Mom, if the police hadn't come, 10 minutes later, he was going to pimp me out. All she wanted was a vape. So I came to I went to Owen Sound, got her a vape, went to the police station. They had the doors locked. She was sleeping in the waiting room at the police station and they were trying to protect her. So I talked to the police officer. He took the vape, and then he said, we're going to get ready to question her. So anyways, they were questioning her. She went to use her vape, and I guess I don't buy vapes. I bought only part of the vape. The part she needed to really vape, I didn't have for her. So she had basically told the police officer she wasn't going to finish her questioning until she had till she could vape. And he didn't want to let her go. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Let her go. I will take her with me. I will get her the vape, and I promise you, I will bring her back. I took her from the police station to the vape store, back to the police station in 10 minutes. I don't think they would have charged me for speeding if they'd caught me because they knew what I was doing. But she testified. When they were finished questioning her that day, the police officer came and talked to us, and she gave him permission to talk to me with his findings. So he didn't call me that night like he was supposed to, but he did have a reason he didn't. He did call me the next day and told me that the person that they had pulled my daughter out of her house was being charged with sexual assault with prohibited weapons, forcible confinement, I believe some possession of weapons, and they also found 2,030 individual doses of fentanyl in his apartment. So from there, she went and stayed with another friend. That lasted until her friend tried to encourage her to get clean, and then she jumped back in with other dealers. I can't even tell you how many boyfriends she's had. So fast forwarding to now, we're finally making progress. So actually, I do need to do a shout out to Victim Services. So after she was pulled from the house in Owen Sound, we connected with Victim Services. They were there for her. Within a couple days, they had given her gift cards so she could replace clothes. They had gift cards because she had come home for a short period of time. They gave me gift cards so I could get groceries for her. They provided her with support. They gave us the names of some treatment facilities if she was interested, which at that time she wasn't. And they gave us a whack of counseling dollars that she could use. She was not ready to use those counseling dollars in January, but as of 3 weeks ago tomorrow, she reached out to me and said, hey Mom, I really want to see that counselor now. So I reached back out to the counselor, and she has had 2 sessions with the counselor, but one of the things that the counselor wanted to do, because she's got a lot of trauma work to do, because her trauma goes back to that very first boyfriend. She's got a lot of trauma work to do. So to do that trauma work, she's got to be free from substance. And substance is her crutch right now. Fentanyl is her drug of choice. So last week, her goal last week was to get onto a drug called Sublocade, which helps with cravings. And we couldn't get it last week. But she happily, I'm excited, she got it on Tuesday. With Sublocade, when you're on fentanyl, you have some very, very severe withdrawals. Getting off fentanyl in itself is not an easy task. My daughter described it to me as having the worst flu ever times 1,000. So the fact that she got Sublocade, she's survived 2 days of withdrawals now. I did see her just before I came tonight. She was much better today than she was yesterday. And she talked to her one sister today, and she told her sister, she goes, yeah, I know to move ahead, I need to do the work. So she knows what she needs to do. She knows she has the support, but I know she's still not free because she's still living with a person who is a dealer. This person is waiting to go away to jail, I hear. Saturday night she called me. She told me that she and this boyfriend were being chased by some gun-wielding people, and she wanted me to pick them up. And I said, I will pick you up, but I am not picking him up. And I said, you can come home, but he's not coming to my house. I'm not bringing somebody with a criminal record into my house. And then she asked for money, and I told her that I would not give her money, that I was done with any enabling the addictions, that if she wanted to get clean and she wanted to, I would help her with that, but I'm not giving her money to enable the addictions. So, but as a mom, you feel like all through this, I felt sometimes like, what did I do? Like, what did I do that caused this in her life? And then my older two daughters will be like, Mom, you raised us all the same. Like, we're okay. And they're both professionals. One's a nurse, one works in long-term care. But I think it was that first boyfriend that really, that's where her trauma started. Like, she did not have a trauma-filled childhood. She had a good childhood. She used to always tell us that she had the best childhood. Like, she had 2 homes with 2 moms and a dad, and she was loving and full of energy. But I still have guilt as a mom. And all I can do is support her. And I think Susan and Kat both said it. Like, if you suspect someone's being trafficked, reach out to the police, call the police, reach out to Crime Stoppers, because you may be saving that person's life. Or that may be the tip that the police need to do something with that person that is being the trafficker. And I mean, the day that my daughter got pulled out of that house, we don't know who called. My daughter suspects it was one of her other dealers, but we don't know. But whoever it was, I thank them that they called that day, because who knows what could have happened to her. So the person that also have all these charges, this was not the first time that he's been charged with these charges. He had just been released previously for very similar charges. So that was in December. He's still incarcerated at this moment. And thank you, Susan. I did not know about the restraining order, so I'm going to be looking into getting that on him when he comes out, because I don't want him near my daughter. Yeah, if he gets out again, he's going to do it again. And that scares me, because it might not be my daughter this time. It might be someone else's daughter. So, yeah, all I can say is, if you suspect someone is being trafficked, report it. Speak out. If you are unsure of the signs of trafficking, do your research. And I loved your quote, Susan, about you know what you know, because you don't know what you don't know also. So just do your research. And another thing that Mel had said to me one day in one of our anti-human trafficking meetings is guns, girls, and drugs get traded together. And when my daughter got pulled from that house and I saw the charges, I'm like, Mel, you are so right. So anyways, I want to thank the safety and well-being community for hosting these town halls and giving these women the chance to tell their stories, giving me the chance to share my story. I want to thank the police officers who fight crime every day and are working on human trafficking. I never realized until my daughter was trafficked how hard it really is to charge somebody. And I've learned a lot. Let me tell you, the last 5 years, my daughter has educated me a whole lot. And I'm way better at my job now because I'm more compassionate. And as my bio said, I fight stigma. When people have substance use disorder, there's probably a reason why, and we shouldn't be stigmatizing them for that. We should be finding the whys, why they are doing this. Anyways, thank you again, and
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you to all our speakers. We're just going to take a 10-minute break. So grab some cookies, grab some coffees. There's some cards out there. If you have any questions you'd like to ask the folks who spoke tonight, we'll also have a couple other organizations come up and do a panel for the last 20 minutes of our evening. Also pull up on the screen a Menti. So if you don't want to write it down or you want to submit it online, especially for our folks online, take a look at that code and you can submit any questions. I can't promise we're going to get to all of them tonight, but we will do our best to get to every question that gets submitted, and you're welcome to check out any of the resources out there. So I'll do a little heads up about 2 minutes before we get back. So take a minute and enjoy the cookies and coffee. like to answer, you can pull it up on the Menti on your phone and submit it online as well. Thanks to our folks online as well who submitted questions. It's not loading for folks? Okay, hold on. It's the QR code that's not working. I have a code if you want to go to menti.com. I can read you out the code. Sorry about that, folks. Also, if that all fails, I have good old paper out front too as well. Okay, so the code is 4991-6721. That worked? Perfect. Okay, I will get started with these. Okay, so the first question here is, what is accountability for traffickers? What does that look like?
I can't really answer that. Like accountability for traffickers is, unfortunately, our judicial system. I've learned that there's traffickers that are currently in custody that are still in the game, and they're running girls from inside the jails. So, karma. I have no idea how to answer that. Do you have any?
I think the hardest thing with, accountability, they need a victim, right? They need a woman to come forward. A lot of times these girls aren't coming forward for numerous reasons: fear of judgment, fear of police, fear of their trafficker, right? And then we're expecting these girls to go through a court process that's totally re-victimizing them again. It puts their healing on hold. They cannot heal while they have court hanging over their head. They're living on heightened alert. So I've been through many court cases with women, and just watching the re-victimization that they go through for these criminals. The judicial system is failing big time when it comes to these traffickers. Things aren't sticking, they're not getting the sentences they should, and her life is completely changed and pretty much ruined. Yeah.
Thank you. So what happens when one gets caught? Presuming that this is maybe the process of being arrested.
I can say that if someone is arrested for the offenses, it is a very long and intense investigation to actually corroborate the information. Unfortunately, right now, the Crown attorneys want a victim statement. They want a victim to stand on the stand and say, this happened to me and he did this to me. And I can tell you that it's very rare to actually get a victim to cooperate. It's just too tough. It's too hard. So that's why we're looking at now digital evidence and online stuff, looking at bank records, looking at cryptocurrencies becoming a thing. There's so many different steps of investigation. So yes, they get arrested, but there's a whole lot of work that happens behind the scenes, and it takes a long time to get all that completed.
Our next question, are there any restorative or transformative justice programs? We got our panel thinking.
Like for the traffickers?
Yep. Are there any restorative or transformative justice programs, presuming for the traffickers?
For the so organizations that work with men.
Yes.
There used to be John School. So John School was a diversion program. If a guy got caught buying a woman, he would pay, I think it was $500, and then have to go to a whole day session on why you shouldn't buy a woman, and you'd hear from a survivor, a nurse, Crown attorney, stuff like that. And the diversion program, it had a big success rate. I think it was a 98% success rate. I spoke at it numerous times. And what I found with that diversion program is that you have a man who really thinks it's two consenting adults, he's giving you money and you guys are doing this exchange, and he doesn't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And when he starts to humanize you and understand what's really happening, guys would be crying and apologizing. And so I think that was the only diversion program that I knew of, and I don't think it's really around anymore.
We'll go to a few questions online now. So we talked a lot about what to look for. Is there anything we can do to prevent trafficking?
It's a supply and demand, right? So this is a man issue. Absolutely. This is a 90% white-collared men issue. And, you know, I love the fact that we do see men here tonight. You know, when I do these kinds of speakings and conferences, 90% of the time men don't show up because there's some shame on, you know, I'm a man, so right away, you know, I'm judged. And I think the language around that has to change, that there's healthy men and there's unhealthy men, just like there's healthy people and unhealthy people. So, yeah, I think that it's a supply and demand. And until that's dealt with, we need harsher sentences. We need accountability. Back in the day, if a guy was caught buying a woman, you know, his name was put in the paper, you know, there was consequences, things that actually deterred people from wanting to actually go and buy, right? Because there was consequences. So, yeah.
That ties in well to our next question. Why do we not hear more about human trafficking in Grey Bruce? Why is there no posts in newspapers, no missing persons reports, etc.?
Well, there is missing person report. I mean, on social media. I'm dealing with a case up here where there was a missing person, and she was found and she was trafficked. So it is, and I think a lot of times, you know, ignorance is bliss, right? It doesn't happen up here. It's a smaller town. People are just not wanting to hear about it. That would be my opinion.
We're a recruitment and a destination place. So we also have the Chichimon. So from May to October, traffickers can cut off that whole entire trip around the lakes. You can get on that ferry, get her across to the other side. You're either heading north or you're out of the province within a few hours. So we are a route up London, Kitchener, Waterloo, all of that, and then coming across, like up that 400 across 26. Yeah, we've got, it's always, 15 years ago on my caseload, I had 2 girls from Owen Sound. So when I came up here, I took a week off of work. I had a trailer on the Saugeen. We still came up here. We came up here every weekend. I took a week off work, and I spent 2 days going around the region looking for services for these 2 girls in hopes of being able to connect them back with their families and supports in the region. And the people up here 15 years ago, service providers, thought I was crazy. There's no way you've got girls that are being trafficked. Absolutely, and this was down in the GTA, so, you know, it has always been a problem up here. For me, this is where I escaped to, so this is where my healing journey began, but for a lot of others, you know, you're taken out of the area or you're pulled through this area. You know, and with all the money, we have a lot of money in this region. We have a lot of money in this region, so, and men with money by sex.
Thank you. Our next question is specific to victim services over here, Jane. Sorry, everyone, you haven't met Jane. Jane is our new panel speaker up here for Executive Director of Victim Services. The rest of the folks had an introduction. So with that being said, this question is, I heard Victim Services supported the mother's daughter, presuming Debbie's daughter in this question. What kind of things can they do for me if I am at risk of trafficking but haven't been trafficked yet?
Thank you. So Victim Services is a program that's available for anyone to contact. It doesn't have to be made through a police service or through a community provider. So if there's anyone that has a concern for themselves or for anyone else, they can reach out to us directly. We have various channels. They can call and speak to a member of our staff. They can send an email, and we can find a safe way to connect with them that is able to begin to have those initial conversations. In that discovery conversation, we're going to meet that person where they're at. So figuring out what their presenting concerns are, what are their needs, what are their risks, and what are they asking for in the moment? Because a big part of what we do is about helping to understand what they need and building that relationship and trust. Recognizing that for a lot of folks that have been exploited or trafficked or harmed in various ways, Service providers haven't always been able to meet their needs or haven't been trusting professionals, as we've heard tonight. So really being able to show up for them in those moments, ask them what they need, do some risk assessments, and having conversations with them to help recognize what's going on, and then getting them connected to the resources that are going to help enhance their safety. We offer a program in conjunction with the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and it's called the Victim Quick Response Program. So that program offers specialized programs and services for victims of trafficking or those that have been exploited or at risk of being exploited, which can include a variety of services, including counseling. We can help provide some of those basic needs to help reduce the demand and the obligation to have to feel as though they have to stay connected to their trafficker or their exploiter. We can even go so far as to refer individuals for long-term treatment, so up to a year of intensive supportive in-home treatment or in resident treatment program that really is specialized and able to help provide that support based on what is happening for them. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but again, a big part of what we do is just taking that time to listen, because for a lot of folks, they haven't had anybody that's just taken the time to stop and listen to what's happened to them. So that's the first point of any contact that we have. So if you are someone or if you know someone that has struggled or that is worried or concerned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to help explore whatever is coming up in that conversation.
Thanks, Jane. The next question, I think it's meant for Debbie specifically. It asks, I'm a mother who also experiences guilt for what my child has gone through in regards to sexual exploitation. How do you deal with that, and what supports can I reach to?
So for me, I had a very supportive counselor that I saw for a very long time, and she helped me work through the processes of why I was feeling guilty, and how I have to remember my daughter is an adult, so they are her decisions, what she chooses, and I can't control what she does, but I can control how I feel. So I just have to keep telling myself that as much as I do feel guilty and as much as I hate what's happening to her, I have to take care of myself. So this year has also been my year where I've been doing a lot of self-care for myself. So through the counseling, I've done some wellness programs, things like that. And that's really helped me deal with it and other issues too. So it's hard, and seeking support. And I go to a family group once a week, and it's not just specific to human trafficking, but it is specific to substance use. And it's held at the Bright Shores Wellness Center in Owen Sound. And we are a group, I think we've been up to 15 parents or family members in one night, and we just go in and we're able to support each other. All our situations are a little different, but we are all kind of facing that same guilt that we have children with either substance use or mental health, and what did we do? And we can kind of work through it and support each other. So other than like the individual counseling, and then just having that supportive group who gets where I'm coming from.
Thank you. This says, hi, I am a grandma of a 12-year-old grandson, and he's on the internet, and recently he's been speaking with someone who reports to be a child from California, and this concerns me a bit, and what about, and then it cut off. Not sure what the what about, if they can submit a second question, but I think maybe addressing the what can they do, what kind of conversations could they have with their 12-year-old grandson about internet usage?
Be honest. The truth. There's predators out there who are waiting to, talk to your children, to get your kids to send sexual pictures, and again, you have vulnerable kids who don't know their rights or don't know, what, if they send a picture, we see this blackmail happening all the time. So I think being very open and honest with your kids and saying, hey, if somebody's approaching you, if somebody's talking to you on the internet, they're wanting your picture, they're asking you questions that, you don't feel right about, being open and just having that communication, that's what I would do.
Thank you for submitting the rest of the question. It said, And this concerns me a bit. And what about the dangers of boys being sexually trafficked, and how are they picked up by the Johns?
So we do see a lot of homeless youth, male youth, who are being sexually exploited, survival sex, as well as human trafficking. But there also are different gangs that are going around that are recruiting boys to be pimps. So that's something that has been on the radar for quite a while. I mean, North Preston, finest from Nova Scotia, they were running through Ontario, and that's what they do, they recruit. So again, having these hard conversations with your kids, being honest with your kids. If they see a red flag, them being able to come speak to you and feel comfortable to do that.
Thank you. This said, what should the conversation amongst men about this topic sound like?
Nicely? Okay. We are in 2025 and you can still buy and sell a human being. That's a problem to me. The fact that women are commodities, that you can choose, what you want them to look like you can put, your toppings on a burger. I think that, that locker room talk, what if it was your daughter? Like, what if somebody, I'm gonna be really raw. When I would go into John's school, the first thing that I would say to them is, how many people have daughter in here, 13 years old and above? And guys would put their hands up, and I'd be, okay, like, look around. Every man in here is gonna go have sex with your daughter. And guys would get pissed off. But the truth of the matter is like, why is it okay for you, but if this happened to your daughter, it wouldn't be okay? So that's the biggest thing, is having these conversations that it's not okay to buy and sell another human being, period. And if you are okay to buy and sell somebody, then there's something broken in you, and you need help.
Thank you. Next is, can restraining orders extend to the person's associates from making contact with the victim? So not only the trafficker, but their associates as well.
So whenever I've been involved in a case, and I'll let Susan answer this after, but if pimps have reached out, got their friends to reach out to a girl or try to silence her, then obviously you're making a phone call to the police, but I don't think you can put a restraining order on just the associates of his friends. There would just have to be reports done.
Yeah, specifically the restraining order, I believe, is a specific person. I know if we lay a criminal offense and that the associates are directly involved in the offense, then we can add them as no contact conditions. But that's pretty much how, again, with the restraining orders, that's still relatively new to me, so I'm not quite sure how that unfolds, but I don't think so.
What can parents and adult mentors do to help particularly young girls to see the red flags?
Worth. I think self-esteem and worth is the biggest thing that you can do for your daughters, for your sisters, for whatever, is teaching them to love themselves. Because when you have self-worth and you understand what boundaries are, you've got a fighting chance. Most of the girls who fall victim to this lack self-worth, have some, something missing or something lacking, so building them up, teaching them to love themselves, respect themselves, what healthy relationships look like. Those are the things that I would be teaching. Those are the things that I've taught my daughters over the years, absolutely.
And I think too, as a mom of a daughter, I know for me it was about teaching her that safety is always a priority. So it doesn't matter what's happening in that moment. It's about you being available to have that conversation. You might be uncomfortable. You might not know exactly what to say, but in that moment, the hope is that your kiddo knows that you're going to be somebody that can help get them to a place of safety, or come and pick them up if something doesn't feel right, to trust their instinct. And if they make that call to you, doesn't matter when it is or what they're doing. I always said to my daughter, it doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what, doesn't matter why, you call me and then we're gonna get you safe, and then we're gonna have the discussion about what's going on, and then we're gonna unpack it. But if we're not able to have those conversations, or if they don't have a safe person, if it's not you, hopefully it's somebody else that they can reach out to. Start having those discussions early, and have them frequently. Don't make it about when you see something happening. Make it about an ongoing conversation that, who would you go to? Who would you talk to? And what would that look like? Because when we can empower kiddos and youth to know who to call or where to go or how to reach out, they're gonna be more inclined to take that help or take that step if they know where they can reach out to that's gonna be safe, and that they're going to be valued, they're gonna be heard, they're going to be trusted, and we're gonna help get them to a place of safety.
Thank you. That was our last question. So I just want to take a moment to thank again all of our speakers and our panelists. If everyone can join me in a round of applause for them. We really appreciate them sharing their expertise, their stories, their experiences, and we hope that you take a piece of information home with you tonight. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, post it on social media what you learned tonight. Put a link to the Canada Anti-Human Trafficking website so people can take a look at it. Have these conversations with your loved ones, with family, anyone you see on the street. If you feel comfortable enough to approach them and have a conversation, let them know there's support out there for them. And if you're experiencing, please reach out to any of the supports that have been chatted about tonight. Grab a resource on your way out. Again, thank you to Southport Church for hosting us tonight. Greatly appreciated, and having the opportunity to be online. This is our first time having it online since folks don't feel comfortable enough to come out. So there was this great opportunity, and we're very thankful. And to Bruce Power as well, too, for sponsoring our speakers tonight to ensure that we're able to bring these powerful voices to the community. If you're interested, we're having 4 more sessions from these, or 3 more sessions from these speakers as well too. You can check them out on the Community Safety Wellbeing website, and stay involved in your communities moving forward. If there's events like this, discussions, participate, share your voice, hear from others, and keep learning. So thank you again, and I hope everyone gets home safe tonight. Thanks.